Feeling stuck lately? Like life's passing you by? Get to know M.A.Y.A.
Acronym My Ambition, Your Ambition.
Reconnect with your dreams, your goals, your ambitions. Find your motivation and start to live the life you desire. Explore the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast at M.A.Y.A.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to episode 62. So far behind. We should be up to like 65 or 66 right about now. But unfortunately, life has thrown me a small curveball. And it's taken me away from my passion, which is podcasting. But it's okay, because I'd rather do my podcast when the energy's right and I can really bring the topic to you and I'm enthusiastic about it. In the last couple of weeks, have not quite been there. Not to mention, I've been celebrating my birthday, the big 5-0. So I've been really taking it in and enjoying myself and reconnecting with people. So I feel like it was time well spent. And as I move forward and do more episodes, there's some things I definitely want to dive into that. And reflecting on my first 50 years of what I've learned, lessons I've been taught, I think there's something that can be shared with people no matter where you are at your juncture, obviously, in life. So as always, the greeting is namaste. Welcome to another episode of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, the podcast that I like to say is forward thinking and likes to bring salient topics to the table that are related to mental wellness. Remember, I don't like saying the word mental illness or mental health. It's about mental wellness. I want people to rethink the idea of approaching their mentals, so to speak, as you would any other part of maintaining your temple, your body. So it's mental wellness here. And I always say I'm your friendly neighborhood mental wellness advocate, so to speak. But as we try to take these topics and be forward thinking, and kind of put a little edge and make it interesting, because there's nothing really sexy about talking about mental wellness necessarily, I try to put it in a space that people can enjoy. So the focus of the podcast is to pull back that veil of self-doubt and sabotage that plagues every single one of us in our lives at some point, and to help you, as well as myself, to identify the ambitions and harness the motivation to help us yield that satisfaction, success we want in our daily lives. I want to get past the idea of loftiness. If nothing else in the pandemic, people have probably learned how important the every single moment being present, the everyday life is cumulative, and it builds into long-term experiences. Don't forget to smell the flowers, because you see a whole rose bed in front of you. Pick one up and smell it. So I want people to get used to the idea of we're taking this one day at a time. And when we have one successful day, that moves into other successful days. So if you are a first-time listener or viewer, well, welcome. Fair warning, buckle up for safety, because occasionally it can be an unexpected bumpy ride. I might just say something for you that you hadn't thought about, or it's reflective and you're like, okay, that really made me stop and pause. Let me think about that. But rule number one with this podcast is you work at your own pace. So this is episode 62. There's 61 more episodes. I always encourage, if you have just discovered M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, go back to the beginning and listen to some of the episodes. I mean, I think there's something you can pull from each one. One may resonate with you, another may not, but I still think there's a nugget in every single one. And I'm not just saying that because I'm the podcaster. I legitimately feel when I bring something to the table, it's usually prompted by an experience or something that I think it's worthy of conversation. So you work at your own pace. So whether you're, a first-time viewer, remember you work at your pace. But if you're a returning listener, well, of course, you know how this works. I always say, grab that space where this can be 60 minutes of you time. Get a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen so you can jot down if I say something that really makes you reflect or think, or maybe you might have a question for me. Because, one of the things about M.A.Y.A is I like to be interactive. So you can always join the podcast, the conversation, simply by typing into the comment section, whether it's Facebook or YouTube, and I can share your comments with others as they're watching the show as well. But remember, a key thing as well is we have the virtual mailbag. That was actually how we kind of began this particular season. So with the virtual mailbag, what you can do is send me an email to getinspired@mayakai.com, and then I'll read it. And sometimes I have to dig a little deeper with people and say, tell me a bit more about what you mean by that. Give me just a little bit more insight. Sometimes I will string together a series of letters, because I think it's worth it being an episode, and say, hey, here's what the listeners are asking questions about. Here's about 4 different letters that I thought were, worthy of being one episode of its own. But either way, people have thrown some things at me. They said, you made me think about something. Can you give me more insight on this? I always say to people, yes, I'm here to be your friendly mental wellness advocate via this podcast. But if it gets deep, my response to you is always going to be, go find your own individual advocate and a counselor and a therapist. One of the things with the stigma, people don't understand. Sometimes your counselor is just that sounding board, stepping outside your comfort zone, outside of people who think they know you or understand your struggle. And you take it to someone who's going to listen to you, your concerns. But at the same time, a good therapist is always going to be honest. So the M.A.Y.A mailbag, you can throw something at me. And like I said, I'll respond and maybe say, hey, I think this is a question that you should really pick up with a counselor. But if it's worthy enough, I may string it into an episode because I've gotten fond of saying, hey, it's the M.A.Y.A virtual mailbag. Let's see what some of the listeners are saying. So just shoot me an email, a virtual letter at getinspired@mayakai.com. But of course, I said there were 61 other episodes. So how can you find the episodes? Well, of course, you can always find episodes of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition at mayakai.com. Hopefully by now you have subscribed to my YouTube channel, which is go to YouTube, type in Maya Kai, scroll down past all of the Japanese anime, and boom, there I am. You can listen that way too. But I'm not biased. If you happen to have a podcast platform of choice, feel free to use it. You can find me on Apple Podcast, iTunes, Google, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audible, Spotify. There's a couple other ones. Just put in M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and I should pop up for you to listen to all my episodes that are there. Lastly, our last housekeeping item, get social with me. By now, hopefully, some people have been checking in like, hey, where have you been? I appreciate that you missed me. That means somebody's really paying attention to what I'm saying. So thank you for that. You can always find me at Maya_Kai at Twitter, Instagram, at Maya Kai Presents on Facebook. So make sure you like, subscribe, and share, because maybe I'm going to say something that isn't going to be riveting to you, but you never know. It might impact somebody else's life. So we start every single show with what? The toolbox. Within every episode, I give you something to put into the M.A.Y.A toolbox, something that you can use is going to help you to get to being that best version of yourself, to tackle that situation that maybe you're struggling with. And one of the key things that you should always have, you take out front and center out of your M.A.Y.A toolbox. Not to mention, when you wake up in the morning, you should be taking it out. And before you go to bed at night, you should put it away so your brain can kind of rest. But emotional intelligence, one of the key things here we're always working on, your ability to perceive, evaluate, and control emotions. Yours first and foremost. And then you begin to understand others, because empathy rolls into this. Something else is going to be in your toolbox. When you understand the things that really impact you emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, financially, all socially, these are all domains of mental wellness, so to speak, that I speak to. Once you come to understand how something really controls you and you act accordingly, that's when change really starts to happen in your life. Because then you'll start looking at something that's a trigger for you, or a person's a trigger, and you'll start to say to yourself, I've come to realize this is something that really just seems to flip my switch. And then once you perceive this, you then evaluate and say, why? Is this a high emotional relationship? And hence the value is high to me. So hence I respond accordingly. Or wait a minute, maybe I'm putting too much value into this relationship because it seems very one-sided to me. Either way, you then have to evaluate and then decide how you're going to control, hence act in the scope of that relationship. So we had our toolbox moment. You took out your emotional intelligence. You're ready to listen. Let's go ahead and jump right into M.A.Y.A episode 62, Finding Peace in the Storms of Life. And I'm going to tell you something. I think people have been so challenged in the storms of life. This has probably meant more to some people in the last 2 to 3 years than it has ever meant, because we were challenged in ways with the pandemic that we did not expect, we could not control, and we were pushed out of our comfort zones. And some people thrived, some people barely survived, and some people absolutely are still drowning emotionally, mentally, financially, physically, and all the domains that I talk about. One of the things that's really important is even in a storm, you can find peace. And I know that sounds crazy. If you know anything about hurricanes, which I love, I'm using as an analogy a little bit later in the podcast, on the outside, they are absolutely destruction based. But in the eye, the center, there's a peace and calm that you would not expect to be there. This is what we should aspire to when we talk about weathering a storm. There may be things swirling around us, tearing our lives apart, but we have to find that inner peace because we have become to know and love ourselves enough that we can. Because here's the thing that's key. Life is full of ups and downs, and often we tend to remember and focus more on the adversity than the successes, whether it's crazy, hard, upside down, insanely ridiculous, or inconvenient. Whatever ball life throws at you, how you look at it will determine how you manage it. Learning to manage the storms of life is a key life skill that we're often not taught, but we can learn. I always say, we believe there is no guide to parenting. I believe there is an unwritten guide. Some things along the way that you have learned in your life lessons that you should be prepared to work and teach your children about so that they don't maybe make the same mistakes. Doesn't mean they won't, but you can prepare them in a way that I'm giving you knowledge, and what you choose to do with it is going to be how you decide to work with it. But I at least want you to be aware of some things that can be challenges in life. And if you start to have these conversations younger, it makes you a better prepared adult. It doesn't mean you don't have hard times. It doesn't mean that emotionally sometimes you might fold, but you can dig down deep and find ways to work through it if someone at least remotely gave you a tool to pull out to try to work with. So learning to manage the storms of life may be a life skill that many of us didn't learn. We weren't taught it. But in this episode, Finding Peace in the Storm of Life, we will explore how to forecast, prepare, and even adjust to foreseen and unforeseen stressors in life. And the key to that is foreseen and unforeseen. And I'll tell you, a lot of people can know something is coming down the pipeline, and they don't prepare themselves. They wait for it all to fall apart. When if you knew something was coming, you can prepare. It's the unforeseen stuff that often should put you in a tailspin. But if you know something's coming down the pipeline, regardless to how you feel about what's coming, the question is, what are you going to do about it because you see it coming or you see it in your rear view mirror? It's how you choose to respond. And these are the things that we really have to think about. Now, the first thought I want to put on the table for discussion that society often discounts or distorts is that life is fair. I have to say this because I frequently say to everybody, life's not fair. I'm sorry, it's not. And to believe that it should be when it's not lends itself to something I think is dangerous thinking. Wishful thinking versus dealing in reality. You can wish that life would be fair, but what you see unfolding in front of you tells you what exactly it is, and you have to make the adjustments accordingly. It doesn't matter that it's not fair. Preparing yourself for the unfairness so that you can be successful is the key thing. And I think it's awful when we tell children that life is fair because we're preparing them for failure. Everyone's a winner. No, I know that sounds mean, but no, everyone's not going to be a winner at the science fair. So should they all get a trophy? No, everyone's not a winner at the tournament. And we've turned this idea that we have to coddle children and make them feel like life is fair. And then we wonder why they fall apart when they're hit with reality that life isn't fair and you've been ill prepared for it. So the first thing I'm putting on the table is life is not fair. So when the storms of life come rolling around, guess what? They're coming, whether you want them to come or not. Fair or unfair. It could seem like cards are being dealt on your table that just haven't I had enough? Okay, well, you might be right, but what are you about to do? What's coming down the pipeline? Okay. So life is not fair. And here's the other thing that really is distorted is there often isn't a level playing field. The reality is in the ideal world and utopia, yes, these things make sense. But because life deals with variables. So if we put variables in perspective, I like to kind of throw that term in there. We can be literal to use it as something to measure the conversation with. Variables are really key to understand because it would be par for course if everything could be controlled. But as we have seen, and we probably all have experienced, at some point in life, there's just some unrealistic beliefs and are very misleading with assumptions because there's too many variables in life to make you believe that it can just be that straightforward. Now, note, I almost got ahead of myself. I referred to life being unfair and not a level playing field because of variables. Variables, if we put that in definition like I was about to say, by definition, are elements or features or factors that are liable to vary or change. Mind you, good or bad. A variable has no negative or positive connotation. It's just how it plays into a situation and affects outcomes. So because there are multiple variables in life that can affect your experience, for instance, gender can be a variable that could, totally impact your experience in life. Race, nationality, religious background, socioeconomic background, education background. There's tons of variables that play into your life that really shape the experience. And if you don't understand how different variables can shape your experience, it could lead to some very difficult and disappointing times. It really can. And this is why I want people to begin to open their eyes, like, what are the variables that are really impacting your life? So it's important because variables are subject to change. So where you might start at one point in life, I'll give you a weird off the cuff example. You're an average income person, maybe struggling to make it, and you win the lottery. A variable just changed for your income. And that variable can change the whole trajectory of your life. Just an example. Just an example. So understanding the variables that are incorporated into your daily experience and your long-term life experiences are really important. So when things change or they vary, understanding this is really important, especially early in life. It can be paramount. And learning it late in life can be tedious work, cleaning up the messes and mistakes you made just because you didn't look at the world from a really realistic perspective. Now, I know that right there within itself can be arbitrary thinking. Well, really, how do I know if I'm not being realistic? Well, that's another episode all within itself. But remember, we talk about being mindful about objectivity versus subjectivity. It's an episode in your toolbox. When you learn that skill set, that's how you begin to get through the tedious work of understanding, am I really coming from this from just my perspective? Or am I saying there's technically three sides to the coin and I'm only one? That's what's key. So perspective in chaos is the greatest tool you can have beyond emotional intelligence. Perspective. By the way, there's an episode about perspective and perception, key things that you should learn about. Okay, so ask yourself a question. Is it possible to plan ahead for possible emotional disaster or a sudden unforeseen calamity in your life? Yes and no. Of course, there has to be a dichotomy to all of this conversation because this is what makes preparedness so difficult to kind of get ready for emotional kind of, calamities that come your way. But, so yes and no. If you don't see a pitfall coming, you're likely to fall into it. But if you see a sign, for instance, that might say something like, bridge closed. You see bridge closed, and you realize that you have to alter your path. You see that there's a change because the road is closed. So maybe a path or a way you went to work or did something in life has shifted because there's been variables introduced that maybe has closed those options out to you. So let's be honest. If we were given warnings like bridge closed and road closed, like we do when we're driving, life would be a hell of a lot easier to navigate, wouldn't it? But truth be told, we're not. So I know. Wouldn't it be great though if there was a sign that kind of started blinking, like, somehow like your spidey senses went off, like warning, or danger, Will Robinson, danger. It would be great if we had those kind of warning signs coming down the pipeline to really help us to prepare. But unfortunately, we don't get those bridge closed or road construction for the next 15 miles. So you can realize, well, maybe if I get stuck in this traffic now for 15 miles, it's going to change maybe the time I was going to arrive at a destination. So maybe I then have to contact someone and say, oh, there's road construction and I didn't know I'm going to be maybe 15 or 20 minutes late. I didn't anticipate this. We don't get that kind of things when you talk about getting those, emotional calamities. You can begin to prepare yourself, though, for what you may anticipate as an issue about to have an uprising. That's different. Unforeseen things you can't really be ready for, but it's going to be how you see the unforeseen situation, where your mindset is. Are you looking at it as this is a problem, but I am not going to let this detract me? Or do you fall right into it like, this is so unfair and this kind of stuff always happens to me? Because once you get into the woe is me, that mode, pretty much you've already derailed your ability to really handle a situation properly. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it does feel that way, but you got to check yourself before you jump into a situation and make it worse than what it needs to be. Sometimes outcomes and situations are not going to be favorable. That's the other reality to this too. Sometimes you're not going to like the outcome, but you got to be prepared for it and be ready to work through it, because if you can't change it, the question is, how can you manage it and work through it when it's out of your control? So think about it. What pops into your head? You think about storms of life, and they're not created equal, by the way. So losing a job, getting a divorce, ending a friendship, health issues, losing a loved one. Each of these situations impact people differently. Believe it or not, some people lose loved ones and it is not nearly as devastating to them, maybe, as losing a job. And most people would be like, how is that possible? And how are you managing it that way? So, but here's the thing, everybody puts value onto things differently. Some people process death differently, so they can accept things in a different way that others cannot. So, the degree of how something can impact you is going to vary from person to person. Think of managing life storms like we would categories in a hurricane. I kind of mentioned this earlier. The impact, which is then I guess you could say, quantified by the destruction with hurricanes, is based on wind intensity, you know, that are people that are in the storm's path and how they prepare for it. So if I'm going to talk about it, let's actually put it on screen and talk about it. So hurricanes are given categories 1 through 5. And obviously, 1 is, okay, there's going to be some damage because the wind speeds are 74 to 95. Okay, and you can go through this whole graphic and see, you get to 3, okay, winds are up to 111 to 129. It's devastating. Those are times when people are being told to evacuate. This is not safe for you to be here. You can't weather this storm. And we know category 5s are catastrophic, and so are 4s, because the wind speed is so high, they cannot be managed. They cannot be managed. I would like for people to kind of take this same idea about life storms and ask yourself, what's a category 1 storm for me versus what's a category 5? This is coming to understand you, not what other people think, because it doesn't matter. It's like, is a category 1, is it, okay, I lose my job, but you feel like you'd be in a position where financially it's not devastating and you could work through it. For somebody else, they might be like, no, that's a category 3 for me. It's devastating because I don't have savings or I don't have residual income that I can manage that storm. A lot of people learned that through COVID. So like I said, losing a job for one person can be different for somebody else. The end of a relationship for one person is like, okay, well, you know what? I guess it wasn't meant to be. For somebody else, they think it's the end of the world. It's a category 5. Isn't it interesting how emotions play into this? But obviously, it's the variables within each of these different situations that impact you. So part of weathering the storms of life is ask yourself, what's my category 1 versus a category 5? And maybe you only have 4 categories or 3. Maybe that's it. Some people have done some work and they're comfortable with dealing and navigating adversity. Other people are not. So some people may not have a 5. Some people may only have a 1 through 3, and it's okay. But I want you to start thinking about, what are the most important things in your life? Family, work, whatever the case may be. Put them by priority. And then ask yourself, if I lose, a parent at this point in my life, how am I going to manage this? Versus if I lose a child, that's a whole different situation. But start to put these things in perspective so you have an understanding how things can truly impact you. Because giving it the forethought is one of the key ways of trying to manage situations when they creep up on you. Seriously. So you ask yourself in situations, how would things impact me? If I've got 5, maybe even 6 domains, because I've actually seen some additional category 6s. But ask yourself, emotionally, when you put these things in perspective, job, family, relationship, all these things, then ask yourself how they weigh in emotionally for you, mentally, physically. Would it affect your health? You got to ask yourself these different questions to kind of get through things. Would it financially kind of take me for a tailspin? Would it spiritually challenge me? Would it socially? I've had people say to me in counseling after a loss that they really questioned their faith. They questioned their faith because they felt it wasn't fair. Gets back to life isn't fair. And they couldn't understand how certain things could happen. So they begin to question their faith. So a loss for some people may physically make them ill, but it also may question their spirituality and their faith. They may withdraw from people socially. So you got to ask yourself, this is one thing for me would be a category 1 because emotionally it wouldn't affect me slight. And this is where you get to understand where the heavy weight is navigating through your storms of life. But what's key is note, managing situations, you have to truly look at its weight and gravity on you. This is why I'm saying really evaluate when you put your categories up, like how does this affect me emotionally? You got to do that. And once you then figure that out, ask yourself, can there ever be a silver lining in this, any of this? Is it just short-term discomfort? Or is it a possible long-term gain? Maybe this is initially hard right now, but down the road, there can be benefit from it. You got to ask yourself a question. Now, obviously in loss, especially when we talk about death, this would be a hard thing to kind of put in perspective. And I've done probably more grief counseling than I ever thought I would, but I'll tell you the one conversation that myself and others have had about it is the person was suffering. And they said, the only silver lining I can find in this is they can now find peace because the absolute hurt and pain and suffering I saw was even harder for me to watch. But after I got past the loss shortly, I could see in the end, the only outcome for this was going to be the loss. So they no longer had to suffer. But it's how they processed it. But it took time to be able to get to that point. So when you're kind of like navigating these things, I really want you to think about it. Let's have a real talk time. Our first one, and maybe our only one before we jump into the break. I would ask you this. How often do you or we see a storm coming, but ignore the warning signs? Or even staunch advice or a heads up that it's coming? A lot of times we don't like what people have to tell us about maybe other individuals or situations. We feel they're being critical. But sometimes if you step back, and isn't it interesting, kind of once the stuff hits the fan, you come to reflect on, you kind of knew it was coming. All the red flags. First it was a white flag, then it was a red flag. Or maybe someone said, I tried to tell you how this was going to go, but you didn't want to listen. Think about this as a kid. How many times did your parents give you a warning about something and you thought they were just old and didn't know no better? And all of a sudden something happened and you were like, okay, please don't say I told you so. But you really came to truly have more respect about it as you got older and could process it. Part of weathering a storm is using past experience to build future responses. Now, there are some things we cannot really fully be ready for. I'll be honest. Mortality is probably one of the biggest things, hardest storms to weather. Despite what we know about death, mainly it's inevitable and it's a guarantee. The circumstance that surrounds it often makes it complicated for us in many cases. Loved ones, parents, someone dying prematurely. It's like hard to wrap our minds around when we see young children that pass away. We're like, how is this fair? It's just hard to really sometimes process. And in many cases, we are never really ready to let go, which is futile because we cannot keep that which is not meant to be taken for or to be kept. And I think this is where people struggle. And when I began to kind of expand my understanding about mortality and death, when I started studying Buddhism, it came to make me understand the preciousness of life, but that people are gifts. And sometimes they come to you for a reason or maybe a season. But whatever it is, be in the moment and appreciate people, because at least then you can say, they left this world knowing how much I love them. I hate when people have regret because they weren't in the moment and did not appreciate the love or the relationship that they had. And it doesn't mean that you didn't. Sometimes you're just going to miss them. But that's when you look back at the good times and the blessing that you had to have them in your life. So it's how we choose to manage the variables of situations that can help us navigate that which is often difficult. Okay. Let's take a break, a quick one, and we'll come back and let's jump into ways to push through adversity, weather the storms, kind of some things to put in your toolbox to help you navigate what obviously can be very difficult situations. That's what we'll do. We got to have some tools, right, to get through this stuff, because life is not easy, and we can't just talk about it. If we're going to be about it, then we need to know ways that we can be about it. All right, everybody, you're tuned into M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, episode long overdue, 62, Finding Peace in the storms of life. Sit tight. I'll be right back.
I can't breathe. I have migraines, numbness, weight loss. I live with it every day. The illness that I'm suffering from is an anxiety disorder, and it deserves to be treated like any other illness. But it's not.
Stepping out of bed. It's easy to take for granted. You work, eat, play, sleep, and get out of bed the next morning. Seems simple. But if you're one of 25 million individuals in the United States living with major depression, sleep isn't always so easy. Neither is navigating your daily life, free of guilt or hopelessness, or having the ability to enjoy time out with friends, make simple decisions, enjoy hobbies, or go to work. Major depression is the leading cause of disability across the United States, and without treatment, the frequency and severity of symptoms tend to increase over time. However, there is hope. Major depression is treatable, and there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Today, there are a variety of treatment options to choose from. The key is to get an evaluation and find a treatment plan that is right for you. Free education, information, and support programs are available. You are not alone. We can help.
It's okay to think you're in a toxic relationship with the world right now.
It's okay to feel like your world is changing.
It's okay if it's hard to find the words to express how you feel.
It's okay to feel like you just want to become someone else.
It's okay if you're panicking over an inability to control your life right now.
It's okay to have trouble maintaining your normal routine while staying home.
It's okay if you're feeling more cynical than usual.
It's okay if you want to curse more than you usually do.
It's okay to wear your favorite tank top several days in a row.
It's okay to miss your job.
It's okay to just stay quiet.
It's okay to be depressed.
It's okay to talk to your cats like they understand what you're saying.
It's okay not to feel the most fabulous right now.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
Whether you're on the go or listening on your cell phone, tablet, or laptop, you can find the show in the iTunes, Google, and iHeartRadio platforms.
With all due respect, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and get ready to be inspired and motivated to harness your ambition.
All right. There you go at the end, a little shameless self-promotion. Welcome back to M.A.Y.A episode 62. Long overdue. It's late, about 3 or 4 weeks, but hey, better late than never, right? Finding peace in the storms of life. So we kind of went through talking about, perspective on difficult times and understanding what adversity looks like, but also giving yourself a tool to really be able to process when you're struggling. And like I said, create that same paradigm like we have for category storms. For hurricanes, 1 through 5, what goes from being, oh, you can manage this to this is catastrophic. Like this is something that breaks you down. And I said, hey, maybe everybody doesn't have, maybe 1 through 5, maybe you only have 1 through 3. Like I've learned to kind of manage things better with, gaining perspective. But you want to look at things like I talk about from all those domains, emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, socially, financially. And you want to ask yourself those questions like, hey, is category 1 just kind of more like feeling uncomfortable or this is inconvenient? Maybe one domain is only impacted. If you really had to flesh it out, like someone might say, I'm struggling with how to put these in perspective. So now I'm going to give you a little extra nugget to put in your toolbox as you're categorizing what's going to be devastating for your levels that you need to prepare for. So a category 1 emotional issue for you, conflict, it should feel uncomfortable. and be inconvenient, but it shouldn't derail your entire life. And it maybe only impacts one domain. Let's say it's a category 2. Instead, may require that you do more change than you want to. And it creates discomfort in maybe more than one or two domains, meaning emotionally, mentally, spiritually, financially. So now it's kind of starting to kind of permeate through different, kind of domains within your life, and you're seeing yourself being impacted. Category 3 should look like everything initially feels turned upside down. Now you're like, this is definitely getting to the point where this is very uncomfortable. You're struggling to manage, and maybe 2 to 3 domains are being affected, but you're struggling in some way and you sense it. Maybe other people sense it about you. A category 4 would definitely be like the struggle is real. You can't maintain, and maybe 3 to 4 of your domains are falling apart and you just can't pull it together. And at this point, a 5 literally is you shut down, you've given up. Every aspect of your life has been impacted by whatever the situation is that's happened. Hopefully that'll give you a tad bit more insight on when you're creating different categories for things that can be difficult in life, your life storms. Hopefully that will give you a bit more insight in how to manage. So I said after the break, we were going to talk about, ways or actions to take to push through adversity, weathering the storms. Here's the first thing, and I know you people have heard it, but people just don't think about it. Find a way to laugh when you want to cry. Sometimes just trying to find the loose humor in something can be the best thing you can do, because it might seem unthinkable to find something funny when you're struggling from one of life's blows. But honestly, sometimes just stepping back and seeing the humor of a situation like, this is so ridiculously stupid, I can't even believe this is going on right now, can help to lighten your mood and allow you to move forward. And these are some of the things that these are all of my doing. It was a great article on entrepreneur.com that I pulled this from. And I loved, it was completely talking about kind of more of a work domain, but I was reading some of this stuff and I was like, no, you can really apply this to just every aspect of your life. So it's okay. Step back and find the humor in something like, this is so ridiculously dumb and stupid. I can't even believe this is happening right now, but it is. Just acknowledging that you realize just how ridiculous something is, or can be the first step in helping you to manage something. Here's a big thing, and it could be one, but it's real. Be mentally prepared. I can't stress how being mentally prepared is so important to help you weather storms, because when you're mentally fragmented and when you don't put the time in to find mental peace before storms, if you're already in chaos, you try to manage another storm is not going to work. So being mentally prepared and finding peace is really important. You often hear people say, be prepared for the worst, but hope for the best. Okay, it makes sense because you're kind of preparing yourself for something bad. It means you see something coming down the pipeline. And that's why I was like, that's realistic. But you're prepared for what you think is coming. That's the key thing. You can dig in your heels and say, okay, I realize a blow is about to come. The question is, how am I going to take it? Because I know it's happening. I can't change it. I can't run from it. You could choose to run from it. But often when we're running from something, the question is, what are you running to? Because it's probably not safety. You're just trying to escape the situation. But if you can find ways to create support to help you to navigate life storms, now you're talking about, there's an episode about your emotional life rafts, having the support that you need to help you to navigate difficult things. So then you're not running to, but you're going to something you put in place because you realize at times I may need a little extra support. Here's what was said earlier, but I can't emphasize how important it really is. Use past experiences to help you dig in your heels when needed. They tell you that, mistakes are the only thing you can truly call your own. Nobody else wants them from you. You should really, when you go through difficult times, step back and assess, use your emotional intelligence. You step back and you perceive what just happened. And you're doing it from a perspective, not just how maybe it was difficult for you, but look at all the variables that were in play, things in your control, things out of your control, and then look at the outcome. How did you perceive it? And then how did you react to past things that have happened? And if you feel like you responded appropriately, okay, but you got to ask yourself, if I had a do-over, what would I have done differently? That's the question to ask yourself to learn from past experiences. I wouldn't have ignored that white flag. I would have said, oh, I see that. So when I saw that first red, I was like, oh, This is probably not going to go the way I think it needs to go. Perhaps I need to take a different direction. Maybe this is a relationship I need to end. How many times have we been in relationships that we knew we should have ended before it got to the level of discomfort and hurt and pain that it did? But there was a reluctancy to let go for whatever reason. Learn from your past mistakes, which builds into the next thing. Look for your insights. What did you learn? So it's like, be insightful, not just, use your past experiences, not to make yourself feel better, but get insight from it. Maybe you bounce it off somebody else. Like, here's how I see this situation, but I really trust your opinion. Am I misreading this? Am I not getting it because I got too much emotion, or I can't process right now because I'm in my feelings? I mean, help me gain insight. Sometimes asking other people legitimately to give you their insight can be important. But when you ask for something, you have to be prepared for the answer you get. And it may not be the one you want, but this is to help you to be more prepared for things that might come down the pipeline about how you could done differently. I've said come down the pipeline how many times? So that should stick with you. Coming down the pipeline. Something else to keep in mind, and I think this is a big one. Make peace with the situation. You can't push through it if you don't allow yourself to move on. I came to realize that I had a bad habit. I would meet people and connect with them like a friend of a friend. And I would instantly think, well, we hang out, you're like in a circle of people that I like. And I was giving those which were way more associate relationships, way more value than they deserved. I had to come to understand, yes, I know so-and-so, that's my friend, but you're their friend. And if they didn't do anything respectfully that showed me they wanted anything beyond just that initial interaction between my friend and them, then they're just that, an associate. You don't have to bring people into your circle because other people introduce them into your circle. Be mindful about that. And I had a situation unfolded and I said, something, technically that person, this should have never happened because they never should have been in my circle. Never should have been in my circle. So once I made peace with that, I moved on how the situation was, but I really had to look at the totality of it, make peace with it. And then I moved on. And it was easier to do when you make peace with something. It's hard to move on from something if it still sits somewhere with discontent or anger or whatever. If it still can harness that type of emotion from you, you have not found peace, and chances of you moving on is not going to be the case. And this is where you can also learn to embrace adversity as a chance for opportunity. And I know that sounds crazy. The question when you get looking for insight, this is another one of those insight components, is, okay, this happened to me. If I had done this differently, this could have been the outcome. I missed the opportunity because I was only seeing one dimension to this. It seemed hard in the beginning, but I didn't realize to be able to push through this and maybe not to quit or weathering this particular storm was going to really lend me some other opportunities down the road. Some people through COVID financially were challenged, or they didn't like the idea of being isolated, but some people turned it into opportunity. Like, guess what? Okay, so I can't get out and be social. Oh, I can't spend money. Some people came out of COVID debt free because they saw something that was uncomfortable, but saw an opportunity to improve. I know people have posted gaining COVID 20, lost 20 pounds. Like, okay, I'm not going to sit here and just stuff my face because I want to be depressed. They're like, okay, I'm going to get out and go walking. And it doesn't matter if I can't go to the gym. That's why bike sales went up. That's why sometimes finding a bike was hard, because people were looking for other ways to be able to get out and interact, and they got active. So some people took something that felt uncomfortable and inconvenient and turned it into an opportunity. Refuse to give up. If it's something you're passionate about and it's a setback, don't let something make you move away from something if you want it, or more importantly, you feel it's something that you need, even more so than want. Because as my grandma would say, may she rest in peace, all that glitters is not gold. And sometimes the best opportunities coming down your way are not dressed up and doesn't show you that, hey, this is opportunity. Try a little bit harder at it. So don't give up just because you've been dealt maybe this particular hand that wasn't great. It doesn't mean something better can't be coming. This lends into the next thing to put into your toolbox. Know your purpose. And if you don't know, figure out what it is. Because when you tend to act without proper intention and purpose, you tend to live a life, to me, that misses a whole lot of value. Because if you're always doing something because somebody else puts you in that direction, and you never figure out what you want to do? Or how many people have you heard say, I think I kind of lived vicariously through someone else. Why? Why did you give up on your own life? Or someone's living somebody else's dream and they wake up one day and figure it out, but now they don't know what to do because they don't know their purpose. If you don't know it, it's okay. Go figure it out. As you work through everything, attitude is everything. So focus on staying positive. It is so easy to legitimately fall into negativity. It's real easy because you have a lot of people that will add into your negativity, that will feed into, I know exactly, girl, I know what you mean. Yes. No, that's not what you need to hear sometimes. Most of the time you need someone who's going to give you insight and maybe challenge you, like, well, have you ever thought about this? And let's be honest, sometimes we have a certain amount of fear of being really honest with people about what we see unfolding in front of us because we don't want them to make them feel like we're not on their team or in their corner. But if it doesn't make sense, here's where you can tell where you're at in your friendships or relationships. When you can really look at somebody and be honest, like when they're like totally like being Peter Popoff because something happened and you're hearing a story, but you can hear there's some error in their thinking, to be able to say, hey, I'm here for you and I'm listening, but you said a couple things that I just want to point out that I thought was interesting, and tell them what you noticed. Like, did you ever consider any of those things? Now, some people who have low emotional intelligence will get mad at you like, oh, so you're just going to side with them? That's not what I said. You just said a couple things that came to my attention that I wanted to share with you that I think are worthy of reflection in this particular situation, since it bothers you so much. So why are you turning it around on me like I'm not here for you as a good friend or your significant other? I'm supposed to be here to help you make better decisions or navigate through things, but me coddling you or sugarcoating it isn't the way. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And in many situations, we will absolutely sit quiet, or we will lie to people because we just don't want to rock the boat. But if you're a person who's working on yourself and you're staying positive and you're fighting through adversity and your storms of life, the blows are coming, but you're just not folding, even though you have days where you just want to give up, never stop believing in yourself. Own your capabilities. You don't need, here's one of the biggest things I always hear with people in counseling and therapy. They're always looking for someone to validate them. Looking for someone else to have the answer. When truth be told, the answer was always within. They just didn't have the courage to look inside. Because let's be honest, when we're peeling back the layers and things are difficult, some of the storms in life that come rolling your way, guess what? You work them storms up. Every storm that comes down your path isn't of someone else's doing. Sometimes we make poor decisions and we have to live with those decisions. And a lot of the outcomes are not what we wanted. Our intentions might have been one thing, but outcomes are different. And you know what? My thing is this. If you look back and you say to yourself, I am very pissed off at myself because I did something that has put me in this compromising position. It's okay to be angry with you, but you also have to embrace the idea that we're human. And when you're human, you make mistakes. Allow yourself the space to make mistakes. And you know what? I always say, remember I said Maya is emotional marinade? You can be in your feelings for a minute. You can be angry and upset. And then you need to rise above that and say, okay, I've been in my feelings. Now it's time for me to figure out how I'm going to deal with the situation and navigate the outcomes, because I can't change them. I have to figure out what to do with them. And this is that emotional intelligence and a large emotional maturity when you can sit back and say, this entire screw up is me, and I got to deal with it. And then to have the courage to really do the work. That's when you know you're growing and you're getting to that best version of yourself, which is always evolving. So this is episode 62, finding the peace in the storms of life. So what can we take away from this episode? I like to say, hey, let's have some episode takeaways, something I think, you can put in your toolbox. I hope my category classification of, situations and how they impact you is helpful. Maybe I'll even take that little chart, I hadn't thought about it, that I made, and I'll put that actually, because remember, all podcasts have podcast companions. And so you go to M.A.Y.A, click on the episodes, and then you scroll down to episode 62, and then you can find a podcast companion. I hadn't thought about it, but maybe that little category grid I put on there, I'll put that there too. So as you're doing the work, you can really start to figure it out. Like, okay, this is a category 1. Yeah, this is uncomfortable. This is an event that would have that impact on me. And then I'll help you to kind of start to do the preparedness. But the takeaway from this episode, Life is unpredictable. Despite how predictable we may think it can be, keep yourself open to dealing in reality, not wishful thinking. And don't make wants paramount. Working through adversity, weathering the storms, what you always have to do is keep the situation in perspective subjectively. Let your emotions breathe, not suffocate. And that's where a lot of people struggle. That's why I said Maya's emotional marinade. It's absolutely okay. Negative emotions have a place in your life. And when people tell you they don't, I'm like, that's a lie. They do. What you're supposed to do is let them happen, let them breathe, process them using your emotional intelligence. So then you understand why something had an impact on you, so you can be prepared to not let it keep being a trigger for you. So no, negative emotions have a place, and you need to let your negative emotions breathe, but not suffocate you. So give it space, give it a place, and then it's time to move on once you've done that. It doesn't mean you sit in it for weeks and months. That's not healthy. But it does deserve its own space, so you understand the purpose of why something happened and why it didn't align with you. That's the takeaway, if nothing else. As always, I appreciate everybody tuning in. I promise I will try not to go so many weeks, but I really think I have some good, insightful things that I have been working on, celebrating my big 5-0. Some new things I want to bring to the table, some new perspectives. I want to dive into more of the domains that I talk about, financial, social, spiritual. And I'm going to bring in some guests that kind of help me flesh out that conversation with each and every one of you, because I think it's truly, really worthy of doing. So I'm looking forward to some of the things that's going to be happening coming into 2022, the new content, perspectives, all that good stuff. So as always, thank you to everybody for tuning in. I appreciate when people are like front and center with me. I really do. And I appreciate the people who miss me. So as always, remember, you can find episodes of M.A.Y.A at MAYAkai.com. Look for the podcast companion that's there as well. But if you have a podcast platform of choice, I don't hold it against you. You can find me on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google, iHeartRadio Podcasts, Amazon Audible, Spotify, all those podcast platforms. Just search M.A.Y.A. You might put M.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, because some other Mayas will pop up. But of course, the easy way is if you just go to MAYA.com. That's probably the easy way to be able to find my stuff. Or subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just search M.A.Y.A, and you will find me there as well. Another easy way to kind of get all my stuff streamlined. So until next time, remember, your present becomes your past, and your future is no more. So live every single day to the fullest. Be well, stay safe. More importantly, keep being absolutely amazing. All right, everyone, I will see you, I really want to say next week, but I'm hoping I'm going to be consistent. That's my goal. I got to work on better consistency. But either way, look out for episode 63. It'll be worth catching. I'll catch you all next time.
Get inspired, get motivated with M.A.Y.A and the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast.
Something that I take pride in is trying to be forward thinking outside the box, challenging myself. And as I challenge myself, hopefully I challenge you.
Find M.A.Y.A on Twitter and Instagram at M.A.Y.A_Akai. On Facebook at M.A.Y.A Akai Presents.
We're going to talk health, wealth, fitness, mental health, financial, lots of different things that can empower you as you seek out the ambition that you're pursuing.
Or get everything M.A.Y.A at MAYAAkai.com.